Shalom, this is Bishop Nathaniel. 34 times the Booster Club has been called upon and 34 times they've answered. Join the team today and help send the prophets around the world. 12 tribes worldwide. Shalom.
I can't get enough for this word, call me library. All you do is talk, I tell him read, I be your pallbearer. As long as my hands clean, I'ma teach, I let the laws tear. You rebuck your doctrine, can't believe I even fell for it. Yeah. Dropping, no top models, no need for worries, cause God got us. See, masculinity need to be shown for real, and all of you that's cross-dressing would be dressed to be killed. Apollo Creed, but I'm hitting like I'm Holyfield. You counting sheep, but you the hireling, the type to flee. This for the meat, when the battle won, they gnash their teeth. I can't believe I even fell for their hypocrisy. Like it or not, it's Kwam Yasharala. Laws attached to the brain, medulla oblongata. We are not the same over here, we walk with giants. 10 toes down where the clay is mixed with iron. I can't get enough for this word, call me library. All you do is talk, I tell him read, I be your pallbearer. As long as my hands clean, I'ma teach, I let the laws tear. You rebuck your doctrine, can't believe I even fell for it.
Minister. In this race, you gotta last just to finish first. I'm in a big league with the top prophets. Warming up.
Read that again. I don't think Raphael caught it. Check it out. Read. Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. Read the whole verse again. For thou art holy people. The thou is Israel. The audience has been Israel the whole time we're talking, right? Moses speaking to Israel. Read. For thou art holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God has chosen thee to be a special people unto himself. Now this is how he feels about his special people. Read. Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So now where is Israel supposed to be in relation to everybody else? Up top, above everybody. And that's thus saith the Lord. That's from this Bible. That's from this Bible. When you read this Bible, there's always one nation up top. Right now, who's the ruling nation in 2020? In the year 2020, who rules the world? Come on, man. It ain't hard. I know you probably think it extra hard. Right now, who dictates policies, politics? Trump, right? What government is he a part of? What people is he a part of? White people, right? Okay, who can dictate war? Got bombs and all kinds of stuff, right? You know what I'm saying? Who can initiate what's it called? When you want to restrict the country from bringing in stuff? Embargo, sanctions. Who can do all that stuff? Because they got it going on right now with Venezuela. I don't know if you're familiar with that history, but they can inflict certain things on other countries that other countries can't do to America. So right now, America is the ruling nation. When you read this Bible, there was always one nation on top. After we were ruling, then it was the Babylonians, the Persians, the Medes, then the Greeks. In the time of Christ, it was the Romans. There's always one nation on top. God says the Israelites' rightful position is where? Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. That is the gift of being God's chosen. Your rightful position is at the top of everybody else. But as I asked you a minute ago when I stood up here, you agreed that we oppressed. And oppression means that you're not at the top. You're not ruling nothing, you're at the bottom. So now we're going to give you the reasons why the so-called Hispanic man, the so-called Salvadorian, the so-called black man, the so-called Native American man is at the bottom of society. And with these reasons, there's also going to come solutions. Give me 28 verse 15. Now remember, Moses is speaking to Israel. He said, Israel, give me verse 1 to 28 and 1 again, just so that way we don't lose the thought. This is the blessing of being God's chosen people. This is the blessing. Read. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 1. Come on. And it shall come to pass. So it shall come to pass. It's going to happen. Read. If thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments, which I command thee this day. So if thou, Raphael, if thou, the Israelites, so-called Argentinians, so-called Brazilians, so-called Guatemalans, Panamanians, Mexicans, blacks. If thou, the Israelites, keep God's commandments, observe to do and keep all of God's commandments, read,
that the Lord thy God was
that God then in turn would
set thee on high above all nations of the earth.
So our job as being God's chosen was to keep God's commandment. That was the stipulation. Right. Just like you have a job. Your stipulation to get paid is to come to work on time and to do your job.
Right.
However, there's a flip side. Just like with your kid, my brother right here, all praises that you up here. We showing our people who we are, thus saith this Bible. So there's a flip side, Raphael, and this is how you're going to be able to show that you are an Israelite according to this Bible. Because there's a flip side to being God's chosen. If we don't keep God's commandments, Moses warned Israel what would happen to them. Read verse 15.
Verse 15, but it shall come to pass.
So, but, however, it also will come to pass, read,
if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God.
So if you don't listen to God, just like with your children, they have blessings, they also have punishments from you. They do what you told them to do, they're going to get the blessings. You know, you might give them a game system, allowance, candy, whatever, you know what I'm saying, whatever you want to do to make them feel good, right? However, the punishments is not to murder them or kill them, it's to correct the action. Maybe they're coming home late. Maybe they're out with the wrong type of friends, whatever the case may be. So there's punishments and blessings to being your children. It's the same thing with God. So Moses is warning Israel, just like you will warn your children before the whooping comes, why they're going to get whooped, right? So Moses is telling Israel the same thing. This is what's going to happen to Israel if, read,
to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day.
Because God never gave us religion. This man right here on this sign gave us Catholicism.
Right.
This man right here gave us baptism.
Right.
This man right here gave us Pentecostal and whatever other religions that we got.
Right.
And along with that came homosexuality, came femininity, the woman being over the head of the man, bringing pedophilia, all that stuff, because that man says, come as you are, stay as you are. That man says that everybody's created equal. There's no laws, there's no order.
Teach.
Read.
That all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
I want you to read verse 15 from the top against Raphael gets the thought. This is what we're reading. Moses is telling Israel what would happen if we do not keep God's commandments. He never said if you don't be a Catholic, if you don't be a Baptist. This book has never been a book of religion. It's been a book of laws,
right,
history, culture.
That's right.
It was never a religious book, but again, that man turned that into this, which is why you said you heard about Israel being above all nations, but you couldn't put into any context, because they'll read you in church a few verses here, a few verses there, and give you all talk. You notice how we're giving you verses right out the Bible. You can write them down. You can look them up. If you've got a Bible on you, you can pull it out right now as well. Right. We're calling out the chapters and the verses for your reference, so that way it's not our words. Read from the top.
But it shall come to pass,
it shall happen,
if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee.
So Moses is going to warn Israel what would happen to them, what the punishments are going to be from God if they don't keep God's commandments. And this is how you know you're an Israelite, because the oppression that we talked about, he said the injustice, we talked about the laws, right? Israel will go through certain punishments that will be upon them. Right. This is how you know you're an Israelite, based off of this. Give me verse 16. Now remember, Moses is speaking what? Thousands of years ago, right? But today in 2020, these curses that he prophesied that it will be upon a certain group of people that are on this sign right here are still upon us today. Right. Read verse 16.
Cursed shall thou be in the city.
So Israel will be cursed in the city. Read.
And cursed shall thou be in the field.
And Israel will be cursed in the field. Raphael, who lives in the hoods and the ghettos?
Bring it up.
You know that? Us. So-called black man, right? So-called Hispanic man, right? So-called Native American man. What they call the hoods? The barrios. But it's the same thing. We shoot each other down. We get shot down by the police. Drugs and guns infiltrate our community, so it's another way for us to kill each other.
Right.
The businesses that we go to, what's it called? The bodegas, the corner stores, we don't own those. The reservations as well look just like the hoods. And our housing conditions look horrible. No heat in the wintertime, piss infested, rat infested. I went to an apartment the other day over South Minneapolis. They had on the door. It is because we so destroy, the conditions that we live in is so terrible, we don't give a damn. We don't care at all. So our streets look way different than what it does in the suburbs. Israel, no matter what city you go to around the world, because I'm sure you've been back to El Salvador too, right? And the hoods down there is probably the same as up here or worse. No matter where you go around the world, Israel would be cursed in the city and cursed in the field. So, let me ask you, Raphael, who was picking cotton back in the day? Us. And even today, who's still down there picking fruits, tobacco, watermelons, sugar canes, all that kind of stuff? Who's still doing that? No, the white people own the companies, but they, oh, you said not the white people, absolutely, that's us. And then on top of that, are we getting paid high wages when we do that? No, we get paid little to nothing, and that's how they keep us oppressed, because we never have enough money to buy our own companies, to buy our own homes, to pass down to our kids. We're always renting an apartment, renting a house. You know what I'm saying? And there may be a few Hispanic-owned businesses, there may be a few black-owned businesses, but as a nation, Israel will be cursed. So you can't just pick out one or two. It's as a nation. This is how you identify yourself as an El Salvadorian, no longer but an Israelite, because only Israel will go through these curses. Let me ask you, Raphael, is the white man cursed in the city? The white man is cursed in the city? Is he cursed? Is he cursed? Is he facing oppression in the city? Poverty. No, and I'm talking about as a nation, because again, we might see one or two, but as a nation, we just talked about they run the world. So that ain't talking about them. Let me ask you, the so-called Jewish man, is he cursed in the city? Absolutely not, because he's running Hollywood, and he has a whole country that America gave them with their own army, with they're getting billions of dollars in aid. So that ain't talking about them. Let's see, so-called Arabs. Are they cursed in the city?
Get out.
They're the ones, again, who run the stores as well. They got oil wells over there in Arabia, Iran, and whatnot. They got bombs. They may not be able to run the world, but they got an army, so they ain't cursed in the city.
Get out.
Asians? This is talking about a certain group of people, and it goes on. Let me get verse 32. This is, and I always use this example. You got an identification card, Raphael, right? Your ID says your name, your height, your address, your identifying markers of who you are to somebody who doesn't know you. This is the same thing that is for Israel. This is the ID that we're walking around with every day in our lives.
That's right.
This is why Moses is telling us now why we're oppressed. Do you remember why Moses said Israel will be cursed? Because what? Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Give me Deuteronomy 8 and 5.
We get out.
That's what we need our people to walk away with. Understanding that the reason why we are oppressed is because we're God's chosen people and we're not keeping God's commandments. And that's as simple as that. Read right here.
This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8 and verse 5. Thou shalt also consider in thy heart.
So Raphael, consider this in your heart. Moses is telling Israel. Raphael, we're talking to you right now. Consider in your heart, consider in your mind. Read.
That as a man chastens his son.
So as a father chastens his son, and that means what? Whoopings, punishments, timeouts, whatever it may be. So as Raphael would chasten his son, read.
So the Lord thy God chasteneth you.
So it's the same reason how God is punishing you, Israel, his nation, because you're not doing what he told you to do. He loves you. He loves you, but you being hard-headed and disobedient, so he got to whoop that. Was that it on that? Give me Baruch 4 and 6. This is what the prophets have been doing all throughout this Bible. They said, Raphael, you know the reason why Babylonians rule over us? Raphael, you know the reason why Persians rule over us? Raphael, you know the reason why the Romans are ruling over us? Raphael, you know the reason why the Caucasians are ruling over us? It's because you God's chosen people. You don't know that. So now we got to bring you understanding from this Bible to go back to doing what he told you to do. So therefore, he will bestow upon you the blessings, which was what? What was the blessing that God said? I can hear you. What? No, we ain't really landing milk and honey. That is a blessing, but the blessing was to be above all nations. God, I'm not just like with your children. I'm not going to give you the PlayStation. I'm not going to give you the candy until you do what I told you to do. Our rightful spot on this earth is to rule the world.
That's right.
But God is not going to give it to us until we do what he told us to do. Give me this. This is your forefather Baruch right here. Read.
This This is the book of Baruch, chapter 4 and verse 6. Yea, ye were sold to the nations.
Were we not sold to the nations? Because believe it or not, so was the so-called Hispanics and Native Americans. When the conquistadors came over here, they were still sending us in ships back over to Europe as well. We were sold to the nations. Who else can say they were sold on auction blocks to other nations? When did the El Salvadorians do that to anybody else? Right, didn't happen. When did the black men sell other nations? Right, didn't happen. But when did that happen to us? 1492, 1619. Right. Read that from the top.
Ye were sold to the nations.
So Baruch, as well as what we're reading about in Deuteronomy, Moses, the prophets are here to remind the nation, give you sense about why we are being oppressed. Right. God is letting us know through this Bible what's happening. Right. You're reminding your child why they got that whooping. Read.
What? Not for your destruction.
God didn't sell us to the conquistadors and to the white man to destroy us, because we're still here. The so-called Hispanics are still here. So-called black man is still here. So God didn't do that to destroy us. Read.
But because ye moved God to wrath.
Because you pissed God off. Was that it on that?
No.
Read.
Ye were delivered unto the enemies.
Therefore we were delivered to our enemies. Go back to Deuteronomy 28. So that's why we are oppressed. We must understand that we're oppressed. We're going through certain things that nobody else on this earth can say they've been through besides us. Because again, I use the example of your child. If you tell your child when they go to school, if they get into trouble, you'll come and give them a whooping, right? What? If your child said they're gonna get a whooping, and y'all just threw me off, man. So you get a call from the school, and then you gonna go up there with the child because they did whatever, they disobeyed you, right? Is all the kids getting the whooping? Who's getting the whooping? Your child, right? Because them the ones who you told. So that's why I pointed out that this Bible, the audience is only to Israel, because only Israel are going through certain punishments and oppression. That's how we know that we're Israel, because can't nobody else on this earth say they've been through what we've been through. That's why I gave you an example about, is the white man cursed in the city? Is the so-called Arabian man cursed in the city? Are there Russian Sandra Blands? Are there Chinese Tamir Rices? No, it's only us. It's only us. Give me verse 32.
This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 32.
This is another curse that Moses said would be upon the people of Israel for disobeying God's laws. Read.
Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people.
Your sons and daughters will be given unto another people. That happened definitely during the conquistadors. It happened during the 1960s. It's called the 60s scoop. And it happens today. It's called Child Protective Services, or it's called the jail system. Another people comes and takes our kids. Again, when do we do that? When do El Salvadorians take Caucasian kids? When they take Chinese kids? It don't happen. But they come down there and adopt your kids, and then turn their mind to think that they also like them. It says a curse will be upon Israel. Another nation will take your kids. Read.
And thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them.
The Israelites would be in mourning because another nation took their kids. Read.
For them all the day long. And there shall be no might in thine hand.
There will be no power in our hand. We as a nation, we have no military might and no economic might. If the Caucasian man was to come up here and do something to me, what black army, African American army do I have to fight for my cause? If a Caucasian man does something to me, I got to call another Caucasian man to see if they'll arrest him. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. I have no power. What money do we have as a nation to get a lawyer, to get justice? We have none. This will be upon Israel. This is how you know you're an Israelite, Raphael. And Moses, again, he reminded us before he started, if you don't keep God's commandments, all these curses are going to come upon you as your nation. Until you decide you want to go back to keeping God's laws, this is how you're going to live. And you notice how we're going from like 1492, 1600s until 2020, because the curses would always be upon us. That's why the curses were always upon the Israelites in this Bible, even until today. You read anything in this Bible, remember I said it's also a book of laws and history and culture. Give me Zechariah 11. Because our forefathers went through the same thing you went through. And you know the injustice that you've suffered as a so-called Salvadorian man, your father has suffered. And you know your kids going to suffer as being racially profiled. You know what I'm saying? Getting the lowest jobs and stuff like that. You try to so-called move up in the world, but they always going to make sure to keep you at the bottom, because we weren't brought over here to succeed. Remember in Baruch it said you were sold to the nations because you moved God to wrath. So this is our punishment. We weren't brought here to prosper. We were brought here to repent.
Right.
Read.
This is the book of Zechariah, chapter 11 and verse 5.
So this is the prophet Zechariah looking around during his time period. Way before 2020. Read.
Whose possessors slay.
Give me verse 4.
Verse 4. Thus saith the Lord my God. Feed the flock of the slaughter.
The flock of the slaughter is Israel, because we're the ones who are being slaughtered without any, remember it said no might in our hand. We don't have no power to fight back. We did with the Brown Berets. We did with the Black Panthers. We got the guns and whatnot, but did anything change as a nation overall? No. Who do we got to go to for those guns and for those bullets? So nothing changed. We're the ones who are getting slaughtered left and right. No justice, no peace, because we don't understand why that's happening. Read.
Whose possessors slay them?
Our possessors slay us. Who possesses us? The so-called white man today. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we're still slaves to them, because they dictate where we live. They dictate where we work. They dictate what time the bus comes in, if we can get on it, how much the bus costs. The passports. It was called walking papers before, but now it's called a passport. They dictate whether they're going to allow you to this country or there or not. If they're going to put you in jail or not. They still possess us. Read.
Whose possessors slay them?
Now remind you, this is Azariah's time. This is Azariah's time, but it still applies to the Israelites today. Read.
And hold themselves not guilty.
Wait, so when the possessors slay us, when they kill us, what do they do when it comes to the law?
And hold themselves not guilty.
We used to scream black power while heroin was pushed, but at the end of the day, nothing's in vain. IUIC has been given a vision. The tents of Judah has risen. Many has attempted the mission, minor murmuring, omitting, and missing the mark. Just reading that he had the flame of fire in his eyes gave us the spark. We on Paul's mission. We out on the road. Purple and gold, from Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, Ghana, Sierra Leone. 144,000 boots banging, concrete crackling. These are our men repented at heart. The scriptures is proof. IUIC, we deliver the truth.